Thanks, everybody. We're about to start the meeting, and we'll go through the agenda. Number one, notice of recording and webcast. And I remind the committee members that this meeting is being webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press or public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. And I remind that this meeting is scheduled to finish at around 3:30, and after that we'll have an informal session which won't be webcast. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is apologies. I received apologies from Councillor Kenwood and Councillor Kerry Brewer.
Not an apology, Chair, but just introduce Tobias Eleanor, who's here to observe the meeting and find out a bit about how the way the council works. So hopefully we'll give an exciting afternoon.
Thank you. Welcome. And agenda item 3 is declaration of interest. Anybody has got any interest to declare? So, thank you. Agenda item 4 is action notes and action tracker. Action notes are to be agreed, and the action tracker is for noting. Is there anything? Yes, Raj.
Yeah, it's just about this action for the HMO listing, which I mean, I know I'm glad it's on.
I think hopefully it's been updated.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll check.
If it has, just
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
I'll check.
And following the request for call-in and the petitions, a letter was sent to the relevant cabinet members. You know this.
Yeah, I think that was reported last time. So
Yeah. Anything else on the action tracker or action notes? No. Can we move on to the agenda item 5, performance monitoring? And we got Meera Gola from the City Housing Performance Report. She's going to do that. And officers in attendance from the service to support her Langford, who is Interim Director of Housing Management, is online. And Gary Messenger, Assistant Director, City Housing Services and Support, he is online as well. And Steve Wilson, Project Director, Asset Management, he is online as well. And Stephen Philpott, Acting Head of Housing Solutions Support Service, is not here yet. And Nathan Smith, Head of Service for Housing Management, is in person here. And following that, Jonathan Antle, who is Head of Business Improvement and Support and City Operations. Welcome. And later on, we'll have we've got Dan Shea, Assistant Director, Steve Singh, and Sajila Nasib, the Director of Regulation and Enforcement. Thank you. Over to you, Myra.
Thank you, Chair. So good afternoon, everyone. So you'll find at item 5A of your agenda pack the City Housing Performance Report for September 22. So this is dated to month 6 of the performance year. For City Housing, we've got 7 vital signs that have been refreshed for the 22-23 performance cycle, and these are being reported as at month 6. So the summary position in terms of the vital sign KPIs, for those that have a blue, red, amber and green rating, is that we've got 3 that are green, and this includes we will resolve council housing routine repairs in 30 days, percentage of right to repair jobs completed against period profile, and we will respond to all council housing emergency repairs in 2 hours. So all 3 green repair KPIs. We've got 1 amber, percentage of housing applications awaiting assessment that are within 6 weeks, and we've got 2 red, average days void turnaround, excluding void shelter properties and families in bed and breakfast over 6 weeks. The 7th vital sign that we're reporting in month 6 is the total number of households in bed and breakfast. You'll see that in this performance report as well that we've got the quarterly corporate plan KPIs reported as well. Again, they were refreshed for the 22-23 reporting cycle. So the summary position at Q2 for the corporate plan KPIs that have a blue, red, amber or green rating is that we've got one that's blue, which is households where homelessness is prevented, and we've got one that is red, which is households where homelessness is relieved. And the other corporate KPI that we're reporting in Mint 6 is the number of households living in temporary accommodation per 1,000 households. You'll also note that we've got a placeholder in the report for a corporate KPI with regards to tenant satisfaction. This KPI will be removed for this financial performance reporting cycle, because although the government have signed off the satisfaction measures, they're not actually due to be implemented until April 23. So we'll pick that up back in the 23-24 reporting cycle. As the Chair's already said, I've got my service area colleagues, Paul Langford, Steve Wilson, Gary Messenger and Natalie Smith in attendance as well today to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Rajahan.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to focus on the number of households in bed and breakfast. I mean, obviously, this is a crisis, not unique to Birmingham by any means, but where we have 1% of the households in the city in temporary accommodation, it's a huge issue. And I wanted to just get a feel for how things are likely to track in the next few months, and particularly within that, a couple of questions. First of all, are the figures that are reporting here post the utilisation of Oscott Gardens? So in other words, are we likely to see a reduction because of from where we are here because of Oscott Gardens being brought into use, or was that benefit already happened by the time these figures were produced? And secondly, I've asked this a couple of times and not really had an answer. I am concerned that the action of accessing the private sector risks potentially being a zero-sum game, so that if you're renting property out as a private landlord and you decide you'll transfer your business to the city council to have your property being used for people in temporary accommodation, and to do that, you have to let your existing tenants go. They become homeless, and then they have to access temporary accommodation. So how has the city actually gained anything out of that? It's just moved somebody from being a tenant in a private property to being, yes, not in bed and breakfast, they're going to be in a home, but I mean, it hasn't actually changed the number of homeless people. So has someone, is that because everything's so tight, I can't see how that isn't potentially a problem, and yet nobody's actually convinced to come up with, oh no, that won't happen because. So I'd be grateful for some comments on that as well, please.
Would you like to pick those up?
Yeah, I can pick them up, Mira. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're safe and well. So a twofold question there. In terms of Oscott Gardens is about 3/4 full at the moment, and it has, to be fair, mitigated some of the use of bed and breakfast, but we've been quite specific with Oscott Gardens. We're looking at sort of much larger families that have been in sort of like bed and breakfast accommodation for too long. So if you look at the whole site, it was 415 units, but we reconfigurated it and developed it so it can actually sort of like it can house larger families with a maximum of 300. As I said, it's a sort of like a program of work that is being worked through in great detail. So whilst you're absolutely right to a degree that it's obviously kept our B&B numbers a little bit lower because we've been moving, as I said, those that have been in longest, larger families in those B&Bs, it's not quite full yet, and we expect that to sort of happen over the next month or so. So that's Oscott. Obviously, the B&B numbers are quite high, but I think I'm not going to go into this. I think you very eloquently outlined we are in a national housing crisis. We are struggling to secure affordable and permanent accommodation. So you know that already. So I'm not going to go there. In terms of the private rented sector, that's very different. We've set up an accommodation finding team to specifically work with landlords with incentives to actually sort of see it as an alternative to social housing, because we have to do it that way. Most local authorities around the country have a very vibrant private rented sector in terms of like a preventative tool, and we're a little bit behind most other local authorities, and we're playing catch up. That's why we've introduced this new bespoke team. So they're working with a lot of landlords. But your point isn't lost on me. But the key to this is actually sort of engaging, building a sort of relationship, building a pipeline of private rented sector landlords. But the first port of call is when any family is threatened with homelessness in the private rented sector, they speak to us and we will negotiate with that landlord to try and keep them in that accommodation. Because you're absolutely right, it's absolutely pointless someone being evicted from the PRS and then placed in temporary accommodation. It's a double whammy. One, it's expensive, and two, it's the worst result for the family. So as I said, this team and my other team, the Housing Options Service, will absolutely try and negotiate to a detailed point to keep the family in their home. Now, that isn't always possible for a number of reasons, and it's likely to get more difficult given interest rates and everything else. And we have to sort of monitor this and measure as we go forward, which is what we'll do. As I said, it's about working very closely, making sure we have that dialogue with landlords to keep people in their homes where we possibly can. And that makes an awful lot more sense than anything else we can do, because that should be your first point of principle, is to keep families in homes. So we'll continue to do that. There is no sort of like, there's no guarantee you can, for the reasons that we're probably aware of. But as I said, it does allow us, again, part of that negotiation will allow us to sort of speak at great length with that landlord and ask if that family can stay there while we try and source other accommodation, which could be the private rented sector again. And that's about working with the landlords that we're establishing as we go. I think we've placed over 120 in the private sector since the team was established, which was a few months ago. But as I said, it's a balancing act that we have to try and monitor and measure as we go. So that's what we're doing at the moment. So I think that answers your question, but if there's any follow on from that, I'm happy to pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's more about the next situation, because it seems to me that the only way we actually make real progress here is to create more accommodation. I mean, ideally build more houses for social rent, but if not, it's to do more Oscott Gardens, which is actually bringing something that wasn't in use into use, and that's what's going to help, rather than converting properties that's currently being rented out in the private sector to being used as TA. That was really the point of my question.
No, and there's many sort of like it's not just one or two things going on here. The whole prevention strategy and the work we're doing, we've got a number of bespoke programs that are running projects to sort of mitigate the use of bed and breakfast. But because, as I said, for the reasons we know, and the pandemic was part of that, but now we've moved into this cost of living crisis. So we're getting a huge number of people who are approaching us. So it's a case that we're trying to sort of sprint into standstill to a degree, and it's trying to balance all those different projects and programs to ensure we meet the needs of the people. We've also got other schemes going on, as you know, in terms of the property acquisitions. That allows us to go out to look at what properties might be available that we can buy and use that as TA. I mean, the big picture is TA is quite sort of has increased, sort of it's doubled across the country, and Birmingham are no different to that, because of the housing crisis, because of the lack of social housing. So, it's just a case of us trying to sort of work through our programs, work through our strategy, and actually sort of like look at different components that are going to sort of meet this objective. But, we're, as I said, we're doing our very best to monitor, measure. We do this on a weekly basis. We have sort of like meetings, as I said, weekly, to discuss the sort of issues that are coming into play. Because as you will appreciate, it's a bit like a bar of soap. Some of this, it just changes quite quickly over from one week to the next to the month. So it's just about being agile and trying to respond to that as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can. But as I said, the key to behind this is try and prevent in the first place, but open up different options. Unfortunately, some of it will be TA, but the accommodation finding team is very bespoke. That will look to sort of discharge duty into the private rented sector, something I don't think Birmingham have done enough of over many years. So we need to sort of look at what opportunities are out there. And as I said, they're building up this sort of network of landlords. We've had events recently, it was well attended by landlords, to try and engage with them to actually sort of like obviously work with us with their properties to accommodate people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Lauren Renbo.
I've got two questions actually. The first was around the percentage of housing applications awaiting assessment that are within 6 weeks. It talks about having performance drop due to reduced resources. I was just keen to understand what are the resources that have been reduced, how significant are they, how long has that been specifically for this one sort of impacted? And then the second question was around the asset management. So we talked about percentage of council housing routine repairs resolved within 30 days. Does that include where we have, and I'm guessing the answer might be no, where we have routine sort of repeat issues? So for instance, I had a resident who had an issue with their shower doors that were broken. They kept breaking because of the mould. Obviously, they came out and fixed them and they repaired them within that sort of 30-day time period. But then within a matter of months, they've broken again because the overriding factor is actually the mould, not the shower doors. In fact, I think twice now the doors have been still within warranty. So it's just not fixing the actual core of the root of the issue.
Okay, I think the first question, I think if I heard it right, was for me. It was around, and I apologies for sort of repeating. Was it around applications not being assessed within 6 weeks? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, it was about the reduced resource.
Oh, right. Well, okay. The reduced resources were, we do have backlog teams. As you may be aware, the council have been, really proactive, and particularly in my service, in recognising there were a number of backlogs that had been built up, which is obviously due to the sheer weight of pressure, numbers and everything else. So we created a backlogs team to actually sort of like drill down on that. The applications, it's twofold. The applications obviously did sort of start to climb. And then we got a team in. Unfortunately, we lost a couple of, they were from agencies. We lost a couple of workers through that, and therefore it sort of knocked us back a little bit. But the reason that the percentages dropped within 6 weeks is because the numbers have grown. So as I said, I mean, if we sort of like the numbers had stayed steady, there's been a significant spike in the last 2 or 3 months. So if the numbers had stayed steady, we'd have still been within that 85%, which is what we were operating at. It just losing a couple of workers coincided at the time when the presentations and people applying sort of spiked. So there lies the difference. What we've got the team back to full strength again, and we hope to get those numbers back up to the 85% that where we were sort of 2 or 3 months ago. It's only the last month or two that they've dropped a little bit. So we're hoping that that sort of like gets back to the percentage that we want it to be at.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor,
I think Councillor maybe had a second follow-up question.
Sorry.
I've got a following question.
Yeah, we've got it.
So, just do, yes, yeah.
Would you like me to take that second question, Chair?
Thank you.
Chair, is that okay if I do the second question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the second question's a fairly straightforward one. So, regarding a repair or another repair, if you like, a follow-on repair, both repairs would be factored into that calculation that you refer to. So, it's a really good point by the councillor that made the question. But yeah, repairs are counted individually. So in that case, it would have been 2 repairs in the analogy that you gave us. So it's a fair point that we do want to make sure that repairs are completed right first time. So we are going to be our new, probably hopefully all members are aware that our contract is up for renewal in 2024. So as part of our redesign of the new contract documents, we're going to be building in a right first time indicator as well, KPI indicator, so that we can monitor how many repairs are completed on the first visit, rather than just having multiple visits to repair the same thing. I mean, obviously defects are done at no cost to the council, but that don't mean to say that it's not disruptive to customers. So obviously we want to avoid that where possible. And again, just to put that in context, we do undertake 250,000 repairs a year, so that's almost 1,000 every working day that we do. So I hope that helps your question, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Ryder.
2 questions, Chair. First of all, about tenant satisfaction. The government are, so I understand from what you said, introducing a new system. How do we measure tenant satisfaction currently? And where do those results come to? And how is the government's proposal any different from what we're already doing, presumably? That's the first question. The second was about the void turnaround times, which it looks like have slipped because of the contractor called 410. Could you just explain who the current contractors are and what the relationship between Equans and 410 is? And are there other contractors in the city who are also subcontracted, presumably, by Equans? And I can't remember whether I've seen it on this performance report, but what, I mean, obviously there's a problem with 410. First of all, how are you dealing with that? And secondly, what is the actual timescale from the time that the tenant moves out to the new tenant moving in? What amount of days does that take in Birmingham at the moment?
Councillor, I think there are a few questions in there. So if Natalie could pick up the tenant satisfaction one, and then we can hand over to Steve with regards to the contractor.
Yeah. So in relation to tenant satisfaction measures, that's obviously the legislation that's come out from the white paper. So it's a regulatory requirement that we need to be completing those and publishing those. There's currently 19 satisfaction measures that will be coming out as part of that the questionnaire that we have to send out to all tenants. We've done some soft sampling of that at the moment, so we've sent it out to 27,000 tenants, and we've had a response of around 3,000 on some of those key measures and key questions within that. That's kind of give us an understanding as to how we may need to improve service areas and actually where we've got some gaps. It's very different to what you're describing, which is the transactional satisfaction. So we currently measure in relation to antisocial behaviour. We send out satisfaction surveys when cases are closed. Repairs measure it very, very well within their KPIs, but there are other gaps within the other areas of satisfaction that we do. So at the moment, it's only antisocial behaviour that we're measuring from a satisfaction piece, but we are starting to look at where those gaps are. So we're hoping to do that within the lettings, voids and lettings, and bring that online so that we've got that availability to capture that, so that we've got that continual service improvement piece. But it's a very different, because it will be a public document, it will be a publicly shared document, and as I said, it's quite different to the transactional stuff that actually allows us to kind of change services rapidly. This is a more whole kind of systems approach with the tenant satisfaction measures.
We see a copy of that. Well, can I
absolutely, I'll send you all the templates and stuff.
Yeah, you can send the copy to all the members.
I'll send it to everyone. Yeah, I'll send you the link to it. Yeah.
Anybody else?
The other one?
Yes,
Can we
Steve.
take the next? Yeah, I'll take the void question, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so the question regarding voids, because I think there are a few questions within one there, so I'll try and explain them all myself. So relationship, well, let's talk about the contractors in the city first, I think. So as members may recall, we did have the contractors we did have across the city we had Equans in the north, And then we did have Waits, which was the biggest contract across the west, central and east areas of the city. And then in the south, we had Fortum with approximately 22,000 properties. So what happened is we had some poor performance in that middle area, if you like, of the city. So we took a difficult decision to terminate that contract in the central part, and subsequently awarded the contract to, well, we did the competition, but Equans were successful in that competition. So Equans have now, since April 1st this year, Equans now operate in all areas of north, west, central and east areas of the city. So Equans operate effectively 2/3 of the city, and Fortum operate in the other third of the city, which is the south. So that explains the move with the contractors. So obviously we did experience some performance issues, particularly around voids in that part. And being very honest with you, that some of that performance has taken time to wash out, and that's where we've been working really hard to catch up really and to get on top of it. The great news is that Equans is outperforming and doing a really good job. So if you look at their indicators, they're turning voids around in about 20 to 23 days. So that's really positive from their side of things, and a massive improvement from where we was. So certainly in the west, central and east areas, we've had a huge improvement. In the south area with Fortum, you're right to note that the performance has not been as good. And if you add that up as a collective, therefore, our performance is currently 31 days if you take all voids across the city as an average. So the performance with Fortum in the south is adversely affecting the performance across the entire city. If we take north, west, central alone, like I say, it would be 23 days per void property. So that's the one part of your question. The other part was, what are we doing about it, I suppose? So what are we doing about Fortum? We've done lots of things. I've personally met with the chairman and managing director of Fortum, and we've gave them what's called a SIN notice, which is a intervention notice. We've also contracted, we've applied that. We've also applied what's called liquidated damages. So what that means is that under the contract, we are making Fortum pay for all rent loss and all council tax costs throughout the duration that they hold any void property. So that's obviously, the longer they have the void property, the more they pay, and it's a real impact on their bottom line and impact on their income, and that's a very strong punitive measure. And we're also doing some supportive measures by giving them our best advice, support and guidance from our teams on site. Now, what I will tell you is, again, because we're very honest in this, where we want to share all our honest information with you. We, as part of that deep dive review from our side of things, from our officers, we noted that because we were even deeper into looking at these properties, we found that not only did we have a time delay issue, but we also had a quality issue. So unfortunately, we took a more robust decision on this, and we felt it was important to get the quality right as well. Now, to make the quality right, obviously, doesn't necessarily have an impact on, doesn't make the property get done quicker. It makes it in fact take a longer time. So we had to take a bold decision to get the quality right. And I like to think that the quality is in a far better place now. And the next stage is really to get the performance times improved. Fortum, I've had an issue with the supply chain. Again, just being dead honest with you. Equans are the bigger organisation, and I've got a bigger draw on the subcontract supply chain. Whilst Fortum have had issues where they've not always been able to retain the subcontractors that they've got. Fortum have subsequently recruited a new operations manager to take charge of this area, and they've also recruited more direct labour as a result, rather than reliance upon subcontractors. So I think, in short, what I'll say is that Fortum are doing a really good job of really trying hard on this. I know the performance is not where we want it to be, but they are putting an inordinate amount of effort into it, and I've got assurance from their managing director and chairman that they are taking this seriously and they are going to get us to the right place. Just a final point, I think, is you did ask about what's the relationship between Equans and Fortum. The answer is there's no relationship, as in they're both working in the city, but they're not related to each other in a company structure or anything. They're totally independent companies. And then finally, I think you asked what is the performance across the city. The performance is 31 days for voids, but it's 5 days improvement per property since the summer when we had our worst performance. But it has sort of stabilised at about that level where we need to be sub 28 days, I think, to achieve target, which we're only a few days away, but we do need to improve. So I acknowledge that. I hope that answered your question, Chair.
Is that the overall relet time then, from the time that the former tenant moves out to the time the new tenant moves in?
Yeah.
20 days.
Yeah, so it's the keys to keys, as we call it. So as the property gets terminated to the new property signing up a tenancy, yeah. And obviously that it's not just about repairing the property, Chair. This is very much it's the whole process. So obviously we try to do pre-allocations of properties. So when we know a property's coming in, we try to find a tenant before in that period we've got. So we're capitalising on that time. We get the repairs done as quick as we can to the best quality we can, and then we let them. Hopefully, we've got a tenant waiting and ready to be allocated to as soon as the property comes back. But we do need to improve, and we need to shave at least 2 or 3 more days off.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? If not, then I've got a couple of questions. Gary, you mentioned millions of funds have been set aside to buy back. Is it from the people who have exercised right to buy? And do you get a lot of people willing to sell after buying through right to buy? And what happens about the discount that they receive? Yeah, not really. Who's going to answer? Anybody?
I think did you direct to Gary, Chair?
Anybody?
Yeah. So I can.
Yeah, I can pick that up if that's helpful. Let me just clarify. I think the question was the rules around right to buy, discounts, etc. So yes, I mean, as we know, we've had right to buy in place for some time, since the 1980s. All the rules have changed umpteen times over the decades, actually, around this one. But if the question, if I understood it correctly, was around improvements and discounts and repayments and things like that, there are protections against that. So if we invest a lot of money into a property and then the property is bought, the value of the investment within a certain period of time can be recouped. In other words, added to the value that the tenant would have to pay for the property. So there's some kind of recuperation element there for the council should that proceed. They call it cost floor protection. And I should have started by saying good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Langford, and for those of you who haven't met, I'm delighted to meet you.
All right.
That answers the question.
From the private sector, or to increase the stock, can you explain what the scheme is about buyback?
It's the right to first refusal, I think, is what you're talking around in relation to that. So when we sell on our right to buy properties, we absolutely have an ability to replenish that stock, which is called the right to first refusal. Yeah. So within the first 1 to 10 years, if somebody buys a right to buy property, they have an obligation to ask if we would like to buy that property back and have a right to first refusal. We've started to execute and utilise that legislation and have recently just started to implement that, linking in with the property acquisition piece. So it's something that we haven't done previously, but going forward in relation to the HRA planning, we lose through right to buy around 600 per year. So we have people that obviously want to sell and move on. So there is an opportunity to replenish that, and we're currently working that through within the HRA business plan to use those right to buy receipts.
Have you got any figures in the last 12 months, 18 months? How many through that scheme have you got back?
We've only just started to do that and execute that right. So it's something that we haven't been fully utilising or utilising at all. But with the HRA business plan, where Birmingham chose to use the right to buy receipts is in building the BMHT properties. So that's where we've utilised rather than buying back the stock. We're now taking a different route, and we will be looking at replenishing as we're going through and moving forward.
Thank you. We got the empty property strategy. I think you need to work very hard on that, because we got tens of thousands of empty properties, and they are not used for anything. They are creating antisocial behavior, fly tipping, and all that. And I think you need to work aggressively on that scheme. And those properties which are suitable for family housing, they should be written to the owners. Try to find out who the owners are, and then write to them. And after a certain period, if there is no reply, you go for CPO. That's the only way you can increase the stock in a quick way.
Chair,
Chair, if it,
sorry, can I just follow up question if I might, about right to buy? So, somebody exercises their right to buy as part of their council tenancy and advice, and 10 years later they decide they want to sell the property, and Birmingham City Council have first refusal. I'm understanding that right? So,
1 to 10 years, yeah.
Between 1 and 10 years. Yeah. Let's just say, for example, at 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you buy it back, or is it sold at the market value, or is a kind of, well, we sold it for £55,000. You may have done £20,000 worth of work, so we'll offer you 75, or is it sold at or bought at market value?
So it has to be bought back at market value if you sell it within 5 to 10 years. Okay. So the evaluations that are completed, if, however, the evaluation isn't considered reasonable compared to market value, you then have the right to utilise what's called a district valuer. So the customer can go to a third government body to ask for that to be considered. If you do it within the 1 to 5 years, so if you sell your right to buy within 1 to 5, and there's been a heavily discounted amount, the discount will be they will have to pay that discount that they received at the right to buy within the first 1 to 5 years.
So between years 1 to 5, if let's just say, for example, I need to understand this. They buy the property for, I don't know, half the council, say £50,000. Year 4 into that, they decide to sell it, and the property is valued at, say, £180,000.
Yeah.
The difference has to be paid back. Is that what you're saying?
So if there's a there's a discount that's then applied. So yeah, if it's valued at 180, but
person goes at 50.
At 50, if we would buy it back, say, including the discount that was applied. So each year the percentage goes down. So we would buy it back with the discount taken off, say at 120. So they would forfeit that gap.
And we've got some legislation around.
Legislation, and I can send that. Yeah.
So this is a trick question. You've got my whole bit, but so if you then re-get that property, and then 12 months later someone goes, excuse me, I'd like the right to buy, they could purchase it as well.
If the property we put it back onto stock, the right to buy will still apply. We put it back into HRA use.
Oh.
Also get standards if you might want to use more than
I just trying to understand kind of, because you could end up in a circle where we're buying properties which people move into and then saying, oh, I'd like to buy, please. And it's not a decreasing circle. We keep losing money and doing some. I'm not saying we should be doing it, but I'm just curious whether there's the value of doing that and what you lose and how much that then is used to go back into.
It's an absolute value for us to do it within 1 to 5 years and within the 10, because for any discount that we've given them, we have a percentage that's given back to us, so actually we get it at a cheaper rate. So most councils do it, but I will let Paul come in because it's very experienced in this field.
So
you've done very well, Natalie. Actually, it's actually spot on. I mean, the rules around right to buy are very complex, and I'd suggest, Chair, that if it's helpful to the committee that they receive those outside of these meetings, you have got that tiered level of discount, but there's all the good strategic reasons to do it. When it suits, of course, and when it makes perfect sense. The stock, the homes are right next to other homes we own and manage. So from a management point of view, it makes sense to do that. And, in terms of the value of the investment, it can feel like the whole cash is moving around in the system. But what we're able to do now, and that's because of some very recent work the team has done, and it might be something that this committee decide to look at sometime in the future. Our business planning work enables us to balance all these different things. So, what Steve's trying to do in terms of asset investment, what we need to do in terms of supporting the new build program, our buybacks, that all these financial considerations are now within one coherent plan. And that's enabling some better decision making and some better informed decision making. But I'd suggest, if it's okay, Chair, that the rules and the discounting process around right to buy are forwarded. They are complex, and we could put some anonymised examples in there, of course, which always makes it easier for me to understand, never mind anybody else. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
Thanks, Paul. Am I right to think that it's only after 3 years that you can exercise right to buy, or is it 1 year, 2 years?
The qualifying period, I think it's 5 now, is it, Natalie? But these rules are always changing. We'll check that and come back to you.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. It's new, I've taken over it recently.
And what's the strategy on empty properties?
Do you want me to take that one, Chair? Yeah. So there's two approaches really to that. So Guy Chaundy, who's not here, who heads up our strategy. He has got a process or plan in place to deal with empty properties that are known to us and brought to our attention. But the other one to talk to you about really is about our acquisitions programme. So we've currently got a programme of purchasing 220 properties with a £60 million budget. For the benefit of temporary accommodation, actually, but we've currently got a Birmingham estate agency firm and a Birmingham law firm assisting us in identifying, sourcing, and procuring and acquiring properties throughout Birmingham to support that temporary accommodation issue that we discussed a bit earlier. So in that regard, we are buying up empty properties is one of the things that we're trying to do.
Thank you. Can I suggest one more? I mean, we've been very fortunate for the last 20 years that there has been no wave of repossessions, but interest rates going up, there may be a wave of repossessions. My suggestion would be, as a city, we can have a relationship with local lenders, banks and building societies, that if there is any repossessions of middle-sized properties, rather than those properties marketed through the estate agents or through investors, they should give the first chance to the local authority as city council. If they are in a position to buy those properties at the knock-down prices, I think this is something we should be considering. Any thought on that?
Yes, I mean, I can come back if that's okay. I mean, a strategic intervention of that kind would need to come through our general fund. So the council is able to acquire and operate in the private sector in that way. It couldn't do it through the HRA because the HRA is there defined for social tenants and all that kind of thing. So I'm not saying that couldn't happen. I'm just saying it would need to be in that kind of context, really, understanding that there are all those other general fund competing pressures, and it would need to be considered alongside that. I mean, I think the other thing I'd say to support that, because I think it's a very good point, is that obviously through our planning policies, we can, ensure that the right level of affordable is actually provided, in terms of planning policy, and it's something that we know we can do better on. I think as a city, if we look at some of the elements of affordable and genuinely affordable social housing that have been secured in recent years, whilst housing supply is quite healthy, that the overall percentage of genuinely affordable that's been delivered is beneath the target, beneath what we'd want it to be. So I think, the development of the city plan, how policy supports that, and what you can do, and I'm sure the committee is probably aware of this, but I will just say anyway, what you can do, of course, when you're in what we call those Section 106 negotiations between the developer and the local authority, we can choose at that point to take cash rather than affordable housing, and then use that cash to plough back into housing for the purposes that you've just described, where there are obviously general fund developments and it's washing through the general fund. So that's an opportunity. But yeah, it's a good point. Anything we can do to increase genuinely affordable supply will help the earlier discussion that Gary was responding to. And we're doing all we can at the moment to revisit as a council those wider strategic policies to try and increase that affordable supply. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Councillor Kenwood. We are on agenda item 5. Is there anything you want to raise?
No, I'm okay, Chair. And my apologies for being late.
You got no question or no? Okay.
You just said no.
No.
There's nobody else up with any questions. Can we move on to the next? Is it Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair.
Jonathan, okay.
Okay, so the City Operations Performance Monitoring Report, looking at month 6 in September 2022. So there were 10 key performance indicators included across 2 divisions. Those include the private rented sector housing, which is to do with the Director of Regulation Enforcement, available to answer any questions. And we also have waste management and parks with Darren from the Director of Street Scene. So in total, we have 4 indicators that I've green or blue rag rated, and we won't go through those here right now. So we'll move on to page 37 of your papers. That's the number of properties improved in the private rented sector as a result of local authority intervention. This measure currently has a rag rating of red and also a red direction of travel. Underneath that is the number of completed inspections for licensed houses in multiple occupation. This is an amber rag rating with a green direction of travel. Moving on to page 38. So this is the reported miscollections per 100k collection schedule. This rag rating remains red, however the direction of travel is now green. On the next page is the number of blocked roads for miscollections. This also remains a rag rating with a green direction of travel. Onto page number 40 is the number of properties improved in the private rented sector as a result of local authority intervention. This is a red rag rating and also has a red direction of travel. And then finally, still on page 40, the private sector empty properties brought back into use is a red rag rating and a red direction of travel. So that concludes the performance presentation. However, I would like to draw the committee's attention to the cover report request on page 33 of your papers. That's to consider whether you'd like to receive the community safety KPIs in future reports, along with the attendance of Waqar Ahmed, the relevant assistant director. So there's 4 KPIs included in that request. I'll list them now. So the number of community sugar inquiries meeting the threshold, number of antisocial behaviour incidents reported to the council, percentage of inquiries responded to within 48 hours from the community safety front door, and the number of hate crimes reported to the council. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions? Mr. Rajaharma?
Yeah, so personally, in immediate response to what you just said, yes, we would like to do community safety ones. In terms of HMO licensing, it talks about continued staffing problems. I mean, this has been going on since before COVID, and it's come to this committee several times. So, what is the underlying problem here? Why is it so hard to recruit the people that we need, and what's the action plan to sort that out? And then on the reported miscollections, I mean, you shuffle a bit about the direction being green, because the last month was higher than every other month in the reporting period, apart from the 1 month before, and that makes it the direction of travel green. I mean, I think that's slightly well. I mean, technically it's true, but it's we're at the second highest in the reporting period. We've clearly still got massive problems, and if we didn't need to look at the reporting data, we can look at what the Ombudsman has just said, and I'll quote that because I think or quote a chunk of it because I think it's really important. It said, the Ombudsman is quoted as saying, the continued failure to address public concerns effectively is as much a matter of corporate leadership as it is of day-to-day service delivery. I'm pleased the Council has agreed to my recommendations to tackle these issues at its most senior level and hope the oversight of both the Chief Executive and Leader will ensure issues are tackled in a more proactive manner. So, we are in the same position here as we have been for, I don't know how many more years you want to go by, but the council is underperforming significantly. This morning, I'm sure we'll get our emails. This morning, I've had an email from a resident whose road keeps getting missed while the crew is collecting the neighbouring roads. I keep putting inquiries in, and this is the frustration. This is the problem, that something's going wrong. You identify it. You put an email in saying, "Please, can you sort this out?" You get an answer, "Oh yes, councillor," and then 3 weeks later, the same thing happens. And I've got now into the habit that I always say to residents, "Here's the response. I'm glad they say they're going to sort it out, but my experience is it often recurs. If it does, please tell me so I can take it up again." And that's just born out of experience. These things keep happening. The root cause, whatever it is, isn't sorted out. Somebody gets ticked off or whatever, and so next week it gets done, and then 3 weeks later it doesn't. And until we're actually getting past that sort of situation, we'll keep on being red rated. And it's a shame the cabinet member actually isn't here to respond to that, because it isn't actually a technical question about the rating or what the score is. It is, as the Ombudsman said, it's about the very top in terms of this council, in terms of changing culture, sorting out what the problems are.
Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harmer. To address the issues around staffing, I'll touch on that. Private sector came to city operations in September 2021, and we did have a review of the staffing at that time. And in January, we produced a strategy for the private sector, accompanied by a service review and a restructure where we proposed new posts within the staffing structure. Accompanying that was also a review of the licensing fees to ensure the licensing fees were appropriate for the staffing that is required to conduct the HMO licenses. So of course, that's a ring-fence budget, which is funded through the fee, and introduced an online licensing application process. So at the beginning of the year, between January and March, all of this work was being done to ensure that we had the correct structure in place. The licensing team, we know, were understaffed by 30%. We are actually interviewing in November now for those licensing posts. The environmental health team was understaffed by 45%. We are interviewing in November those posts. So now we have just offered a senior manager post to somebody last week, so that post will be filled. And empty properties was understaffed by 25%, and we have also offered the post for that, and we're looking for a start date. So I'm glad to say things are progressing. It has taken a long time, and even when you are obviously successful in appointing, like I have been, to the senior manager, they have a 3-month notice period, so it might be 3 months before they're actually with us at Birmingham City Council. And the running to appointment is also a 3-month process. You might optimistically get it down to 2 months or 6 weeks. Let's be honest with ourselves, it could be anything from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. So whilst I accept that, things are still not, staffing isn't up to establishment, things are happening. We are appointing, we are interviewing. It's just a very slow process. But the positive news, especially in terms of the licence applications, is so I've got the October figures, that we've got a big uptick now in delivering, those licence applications within the adopted standard time. Still not where we want to be, but we're on the right trajectory. And where we have a lot of changes to make, like we have had in the private sector, unfortunately, these things do take time.
Thank you, Sadila.
Can I just ask a question related to that? I feel like this is the second time we've kind of talked about staffing levels within these two sort of reports. Is there anything around, I suppose, retention levels of staff? Is there a high turnover? Is there a particularly sort of, is it changing quickly? And what's being done to keep people in their post once they're recruited?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of private rented sector team, I would say we are retaining most of our staff. We have lost some staff. This new structure we put has progression within it, so staff can see how they can progress within the team. In general, we do have difficulty recruiting environmental health officers, especially. The certain professions, are hard to get and hard to retain. But I would suggest for private rented sector, it was just we needed to do a full service review and get the structure right and align to the strategy, which is what we also produced at the beginning of the year. So I am really hopeful that we are on the right path here and that we see the fruits of our labours in due course.
Thanks, Sadila. Also, mine is and then.
So good to pick up my point about the list collections.
Yeah, sure. I'll come on to list collection. So you're right. There's a trend of failure throughout the whole of the year, and we've been working hard to try and correct that. We have had an additional resource added to the management team. So we've got a director of transformation that has started midway through September, and that is to try to provide extra resources to try and tackle some of these ongoing issues. We've had a major change in our data and our data reporting, which is one of the important things. So now we've got business reports that actually triangulate what the crews are saying, what the residents are saying, and actually looks for continual the same missed areas, so we can go in and tackle it and fundamentally fix that right. We've been talking about the e-cab technology. We've now got one depot fully operating on that e-technology, and that data is feeding directly into the reports. We've got another depot that is has been starting to be implemented, and through the new director of transformation that is working solely in waste, we will have a rollout of the slab and that e-technology into the cabs by the end of December, which will give us greater visibility. Half of the issues that we're having at the moment is because we're still operating on paper maps and paper reports. Sooner we can get onto that electronic live data in the slab, in the cab, then our improvements will massively increase. We have October, for example, at the moment, as today, we're at 133 per 100,000. So there has been a significant improvement in performance due to being able to resolve the issues with drivers and get sure we've got the correct number of drivers in the location. So it is a small trend in September, but quite a considerable drop down in October and November. Again, we are on a much better performance streak this week than we have been in previous months.
Thanks, Darren. Councillor Kenwood, and then Councillor Brian.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly getting back on the staffing issues. You mentioned 40% and 30%, which means absolutely nothing. Could you give us actual numbers of staff that, you know, what does 40% equate to? How many people are we short?
So in the environmental health team, through the chair, through the environmental health team, you should have 9 environmental health officers. So we're -4. So you can see that 45%. It's quite significant for us. In the licensing team, that's 30% less than you should have that. That's 4 staff as well.
That's 4 staff.
Yeah. And empty properties, there are 4 staff within that, and we're down 1 staff there. At a management level, got two managers. Obviously, I've just appointed 1, so we're 50% down, but hopefully we will be at 100%. So it's a relatively small team who do a lot of important work, and we put a lot of resource into focusing what their priorities should be, ensuring our software and IT systems are aligned to producing those outcomes and outputs we want. And you know, I do hope this.
I hope you'd appreciate that, you know, hearing those actual numbers actually means a lot more than 40% and 30%, because we don't know what it's being compared with. So that's good. Dan, on the slab in the cab, any chance we could actually go out and see it working?
Yeah, we could arrange a demonstration. Absolutely.
Because I think that would be a good move for all of us to see how the crews operate it.
Yeah, that would be not a problem.
Thanks.
Councillor Rice.
Very quick. Why, Sharon, is it the number of drop roads in this collection rather than the number of dropped properties? Why can't we do that? Why haven't we done it?
We could at that time. We can now. So we have got. So as I said, we're trying to get our data better. We could get it from roads because that was the way the crews have been able to do it. Jonathan has been a master with the back office and technology, and he's now been able to link the road to the property count. So I can look on the system very quickly. I can look at it today and tell you exactly how many roads are reported and how many properties. So we can, in the future, be able to add in properties.
My question is about the mobile household recycling service, which is a welcome service. How has the recycling service been improved since this has been operational in Birmingham?
So the recycling element of the mobile HRCs isn't the greatest number. So we get greater tonnage of residual waste than recycling. But we have, over the introduction of the vehicles, just under 100 tonnes of recycling has gone through that process. So the aim is to, as we tell more people about the service and the service gets more frequent, starts coming out, that people get used to the fact that we can recycle as well as dispose of residual waste.
Thanks, Darren. Councillor Ray.
Just a couple of questions and maybe some clarification. The first bit, I heard you say something about paper maps.
Yes.
So are the paper maps they use to work out where they're going?
So each day, each crew would pick up a round map of where they go. Yes, they're coloured map.
So we have no electronic data or anything at the moment in the cabs.
Not at the moment. So that's what we're.
So don't take this to me. We have these fantastic crews and cabs, and they don't have anything in them like a TomTom. If I'm wanting to be colloquial about this, which says these are the roads you need to go to, we rely on a paper map.
Correct. We had
in 2023 nearly.
We had a TomTom system. It was introduced in, I think it was 2014, 2015. That setup wasn't working particularly brilliant. So we looked at procuring a new replacement service to that. That has been going through consultation, trials, procurement, and now we're in implementation.
How quickly is that going to be implemented?
We've got a director of transformation that has been brought in to help support the management team to drive change, and his remit is to prioritise implementation of that, and we should have it up and running by the end of December. One depot is already using it, another depot is in that implementation stage, so they are being the crews are being trained and equipment's being installed in the slab in the cabs at the moment, and then we move on to the next. So we've got it'll be all done by the end of December.
Cool. The second point, and perhaps it follows on from that, is that you said you kept the number of roads missed.
Yes.
So, for example, I'll give you an example. You go to a road in Castlemaine, the bin crew pick the first 6 bins and then don't collect the rest. You class that as a missed road. You class that as a collected road, even though there are properties missed in that road.
No, we'd still report if they're saying they're not completed, that would be a non-completed road. So we classed as a non-completed road.
So the other reason I ask is because I hear this time and again where let's say they've done the first 6 bins on the top of the quotes and they haven't been down done the rest. And actually that becomes very frustrating then because I have half a road missed. And I'm just trying to understand in my head whether that is a missed road collection or that is counted as a road that's been collected in those properties that have been missed. And if that is a road that is, what do we do then? And why do we end up in the situation, I guess, is where I'm getting to, if that happens.
So we've got 2 bits of information. So the first and the actual performance data shows 2 different bits of information. The first bit is residents' complaints and residents inquiring and saying that they've got a missed connection. The missed roads tends to come from the crew. So what we do is what Jonathan's database does, pulls the 2 together and checks that where we've got complaints on roads which the crews have said that have completed, and that's what we use to present this data. If we get reported missed collections, then that will be reassigned for collection, and we'll check it.
But just around on that, did the crew say why it was missed?
Yes.
So it's not a case where they collected the neighbouring roads and just missed one out. Do they say, well, we couldn't get down it, or we ran out of time, or
Yeah. Every day we get a report back from the crews, and each road is assessed, and each one is put down whether we ran out of time, whether there was access issues, road works, vehicle breakdown, or we had an issue that one of the staff had to do something so they couldn't complete through staffing. So we've got a set number of criteria that the crew will enable us to understand why they haven't completed, which enables us to then start to picture up whether it's a vehicle breakdown or whether it's access or various stuff.
When there's a missed collection, why aren't the local ward councillors informed about it by the local depots? I mean, we get an email second day or third day when the rubbish is piled up from numerous residents shouting and screaming at us, but obviously we can't be out and about on every road to see as your rubbish. So why isn't there a system in place where it's 2-member ward, both the councils get an email saying this road, good luck. It'd make life easy for us so we can inform our residents that we're dealing with it, we're working on it, hopefully within a day or so it'll be collected. There's no correspondence between the officers and residents.
So what happens at the moment is that the crew brings their map back, gives it to a member of staff in the office. That is then turned into a list of dropped roads. So that work directly onto the website and is published, so everybody can go and you can actually break that down to each ward. So you can go onto the missed collection website and you can then break it down to see the number of roads that are missed in your ward. What we're looking at is at the moment that's you having to go onto the website and collect that information. and we're trying to find, we're seeing whether we can take that information out, especially when we get the electronic version rather than lots of type, and then pushing that out to not only elected members, but also residents to say, if you've got a drum account, we know we've missed, we'll be back tomorrow to come collect.
Yeah, what I find is, a group starts in the morning and given certain roles. If they picked everything, fine. If they miss a few roles, few households, they don't report to the depot manager. And if it's not reported by the residents, which happens a lot now, and it's not reported by the elected members, as far as the depot managers are concerned, everything is fine, which is not fine.
Yeah. So one of the things that we are doing as part of our new ways of working within the refuse side of it is that the drivers taking more responsibility for dealing with the information in the cab, and certainly when the electronic happens, be responsible to free up time for the supervisors who are at the moment producing maps ready for the next day and all that sort of stuff. They will be out checking compliance, not just that whether everybody said they've done it and the work's been done, but also checking that things are put back in an appropriate manner, that the pods aren't thrown all over the streets and all that sort of thing. So the supervisors at the moment are spending all their time getting ready for the next day. Once we get the technology, that will be focused on supervision.
Thanks. But I think what I find is the lack of monitoring from top to bottom. That is done on a daily basis. We'll see vast improvement.
I agree.
Okay, well, I think we're running out of time. We'll move on to the next item, which is number 6, progress report on implementation reducing flight technique. Can you remember?
Yes. If you just down the
Welcome, Kevin and Member on agenda item 6, progress report on implementation reviewing flight stroke technique. These are 2 recommendations that you're still tracking in the committee. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so recommendation 1, cameras have continued to be deployed at flight tipping hotspots throughout the year. The first Crime Watch video, as those of you who were here before the municipal elections in May, was released on the 17th of March, highlighting perpetrators involved in environmental crime. It has been viewed by more than 2,000 times. The second episode, I've seen the draft version. They're just going through some typos and a few other issues that they need to clear with legals. That will also be released shortly, possibly even next week or the week after. Whilst the requirements of this recommendation have, in our opinion, now been met, Waste and Service would also like to looking to engage with members, because I'm fully aware that half of the committee are new members in this recommendation. So do you want me to go on to, we have ordered another 10 cameras, and we are in discussion for the new type of cameras. They use batteries and solar to power them, and there's a new software system that can take you to the incident straight away, so the pinpoint incident, a bit like a Ring doorbell system. And those cameras, they picked up around 170 incidents. Do you want to go on to recommendation 3, or do you want the committee to discuss recommendation 1? Right.
Well, just on recommendation 1, Chair, particularly welcome some more information. I would like to downgrade our number here to a 3.
Yeah.
Because I feel that although we're partially getting to what we asked for, we're not fully there, and others would agree.
Yeah.
We did ask for a timetable for implementation of this recommendation, and I mean the fact that the first Grime Watch video was released in March, and then there's been nothing at all. I just think it's very unsatisfactory. We haven't really got the information that we asked for here. So I would welcome us having more information, Chair, and coming back to this and downgrading 2 to a 3 so that we make sure we keep it alive.
Yes, so as you're aware, I was only appointed to the post May 21st of this year, so I've come quite late to review, but I'm happy with that. I mean, the only reason the Grime video's taken so long is because it has to pass a lot of hurdles through legal as well, so yeah, sign off. We're a very risk-averse council here in Birmingham.
It's time we've done around together.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel a little bit like we put one up to meet the thing, and then we can forget about it. You know, clearly the idea was there would be a regular feed of these things that would engage people and encourage people to report and help us tackle this problem, not just have one up and they. I mean, about a month ago, someone asked me about it. I Google searched it, you couldn't find it. Yeah, maybe it was there somewhere, but it's pretty obscure if it was. So.
Just to reinforce what Councillor Bridle and Councillor Arnold have just said, throughout the review that we did, we based a lot of what we wanted or what we would like to see happen based on Barking and Dagenham. And if I go look at back, they publish a wall of shame every 2 weeks. Yeah, and we're patting ourselves on the back because we've released one Grime Watch video, and that was when March. I mean, it's just not acceptable, really. It doesn't fall in at all with what scrutiny require.
Anybody else?
Chair, I agree. I was sitting on that side of the table. And me and Councillor Harper have sat in various scrutiny committees over the years, and we agree on this subject. 2,000 views on a Grime Watch video, which was released by the Birmingham City Council, is visible. I probably get more on my Facebook videos than I carry out a video. When I took a video of a fly tipper on Brockus Road, who was employed then by a taxi firm, fly tipping a mattress, I think I got in excess of 6,000 views. That was just one incident that I took it on myself after receiving the footage. But then I did not have to go to legal to get it signed up. I didn't have to go through the obstacles to get it signed up. But no, I'll take those comments on board, and we'll be back in the when we're ready to do so, and we'll take it from there. But 2 weeks, that sounds really good. If Barking is publishing naming and shaming individuals every 2 weeks, we should be naming and shaming individuals every week.
Can I ask why it's going to legal? Because I know other instances where prosecutions have happened or it wasn't actually taking place. Videos and photos and that sort of information or press releases haven't gone through legal. So why now? So is the question.
That, as a lawyer myself, I wouldn't want to comment on my learning friends on the. I declare an interest as a I'll leave it to the officer to respond to it.
The what can be publicised and when that can be publicised was the most discussed part of the whole of this process. And we are following a very strict guidance provided by the team. It's almost at the point of prosecution is when you can release the software, the images, and at that point you've already got the person that you want, and that's the advice that we've been given to follow. So that's what we'll do.
Chair, now you just come back to that. So how does that advice that we're receiving compare with the advice that obviously Barking and Dagenham are getting? And if they're getting different advice, why don't we use their legal advisors? Yeah, phone number forward. It seems perfectly logical to me.
Have Barking and Dagenham been sued by anybody? Not that we're aware.
Now has a practice list of what I do not want to respond to. It's an operational matter, so I left it to now. Yeah, I'm going to be having a robust conversation with the legal officers and why we can't adopt an approach carried out by other councillors up and down the country, which is working and is more efficient than the processes that we have adopted. But historically, for those of you who've been here a long time, we're all aware city councils are very, very risk averse because of the number of legal cases that we have lost, not flight tipping case, but other cases that we have lost over the years. So I will get on that.
But if you compare that with the number of times we're now seeing ourselves mentioned by the Ombudsman and getting fined for it, I mean, let's get the priorities right.
You mentioned you're going to have another 10 cameras. And what's the time scale when those cameras will be up in the
They've been ordered as far as I'm aware.
They have been ordered. We're waiting for delivery. As soon as they've been delivered, they will go straight out. We've got locations identified. We've been through the procurement process on almost.
Any other questions? Okay. We have 1 o'clock time. We got 3:30. We got another informal meeting. We have to go through the next item, which is work programs.
No. So it's just recommendation.
Recommendation to.
I think Councillor Bright wants to go first.
We've got it. We don't really need to. Yeah.
It's all there anyway.
Glad that we've got to hear it. Again, I would downgrade it on number 2 here to a 3. We asked for a review of prosecution strategies for fly tipping, in particular the use of fixed penalty notices. We wanted to ramp up the FPNs. That just, hasn't happened. And now we've got a comment here that we're going back to educating people first. Well, I mean, this just isn't what we asked for. And it's certainly not what Barking and Dagenham were doing, where in 1 year they'd issued, 1,192 fixed penalty notices compared with our, 211 and 54? I don't know what that adds up to, but anyway, not very many. So, this just isn't satisfactory. And we want a proper, review that leads to, or we want an explanation about these fixed penalty notices, which we've never had. So we would like you, Cabinet Member, to liaise with whoever you need to liaise with, which might be the leader of the council, because I think he's sort of got regulation, hasn't he, in his portfolio. So we might need to be a bit of dual action here to make, to get us a better response than we've had. I hope others agree with that.
So again, as the new cabinet member who's coming to this post just a few months back, I do actually agree with you. I think there's always so much the carrot approach goes so far, and from the city, our flight, we need to get to zero levels where we have the carrot approach is where we're providing a mobile house of recycling. So we're taking them across the city. We've changed the baseline of them. So every single ward in the city does get a mobile house of recycling club. And those that have got historical flight, which they tend to get more trucks as well. So that's the current approach, in my opinion. So this is a new cabinet member liaising with the members here. But I do need to have a conversation with the leader, also the chair of licence and protection, and our friends in the legal department as well, to see how we can take this forward. So I'm happy with the suggestion that Council Bright gives.
Okay. Councillor Kenwood.
Thank you, Chair. And again, just to remind officers that what was actually agreed and resolved at full council, the recommendation was to implement a harder line against issuing more fixed penalty notices. So if that's the recommendation that was passed at full council, then that's what should happen. Because if it doesn't, that means it's a waste of time doing anything in the council chamber.
Chair, through you, still nothing to Councillor Arnold. You suggest that whenever we have evidence of someone flighted, we just hit them issue them with a fixed penalty notice, and we leave it up to them to come back to us. If they committed it, they put their hands up and say, okay, I've done this, and pay the fine. And if they don't, then we go to court or make that, take that into account whether we want to go to court with it. That is the approach that I would actually favour, where if we believe someone has flighted, that we issue the FPN. But as a lawyer, I also have to say the burden of proof is beyond all reason for that. I think that's where our legal department is risk averse, because they're of the opinion that we may not win this in court. But how many times is that person actually going to say that, yeah, we did do? Because with the cigarette, in life fraud protection, you get the figures where people have littered the streets with cigarettes, and the office actually has to review them, throw the cigarette stuff onto the ground, and then they issue the FPN. And more often than not, it's not challenged, they just pay the FPN. And that's the position I would want to get to. But again, it's not a decision that I could take myself lightly. Darren's already given me the eyes, so it's a conversation that I need to have with officers across the city council. But I do think now is time. We've had the mobile house recycling centre for more than a year now. The pilot finished in September last year. We've had a full rollout. That is the current approach we've adopted, and flight tipping has decreased significantly. And you all know I like my stats. So the week 42 of this year, there's 413 reported instances of flight tipping. Last year, it was 667. So as far as I'm concerned, we're providing a service for people to dispose of house items. So there's no excuse whatsoever now for people to fly tip at all. So I'm happy with that suggestion. Again, I'll go back to, I think we'll have to have a legal battle with friends in the legal team here at the City Council, and we'll come back to you, because I think it's unanimous. It's cross-party, and as Councillor Wood said, it was approved in full council.
Just on that, to build on that, when you do that, could we actually get the stats for how many fixed penalty notices are being issued month by month, so we can actually see?
But the stats is, I think, License Fraud Protection Day provides monthly figures, aren't they? So they can be easily obtained if you go into basically the online. What's that? License for a fair few years.
Thank you. What were the rest of the recommendations on the?
Yeah, so we'll say downgrade from 2 to a 3 for each.
Okay. Thanks very much, Member Darren. Let me move on to the next item, which is road program. Amelia, can you help?
Okay, yeah, so this is a standard report presented to committee, so I'll just highlight some differences from last time. Draw your attention to 4.2, there's a table, the very final bit on that table, which highlights some cross committee work. The very final one highlights a piece of work being led through coordinating, overview and scrutiny relating to domestic abuse, and it's to flag up to committee members that there will be an invitation extended to all members of the Housing and Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny to attend that session on February 17th. And thereafter, there will be further sessions been arranged in the summer, although dates are to be organised. So further information will be coming out to you as committee members there. Then the other bit I wanted to reference is page 66 to 67 of your pack, which relates to next month's meeting. And at next month's meeting, a little foretaste, you have a cabinet member for social justice, community safety and equalities, Councillor Cotton, will come in for his cabinet member portfolio priorities. But there's also the Birmingham Community Safety Partnership report. The aims and objectives are outlined here in this grid for that report, but it is just to flag up the opportunity if there is anything specific you want them to either make sure is in that report or can verbally update now, or certainly over the next couple of weeks. If you want to get in touch with Jane or I, we can ensure that that is picked up by the cabinet member and the officers attending. And then finally, in relation to the conversation we've just had on the fly tipping inquiry, if we wanted anything to come back on that inquiry, is to flag up there is some capacity in January's meeting. So based on the discussion there, we can, if the committee are in agreement, we can liaise with Councillor Mahmood and with Darren and any other officers to make sure. If we were, currently we do have mobile recycling service, and that was to kind of update on what's happened and where that's going. We may have to, in December, we might be saying it might not be possible to do flight of inquiry out on that. So we'll come back in terms of capacity for your meeting, but we'll update you in December about how that would work. Just whether or not there's sufficient time to cover all 3 items. So, but it might be possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next item is date of the next meeting is 15th of December. And that's for voting. And the number 9, request for forwarding cost controller for action petitions received. Thank you. And number 10 is other urgent business. Number 11, authority to chair and officers in meetings. Is that agreed?
Great.
Thanks very much. Before we go to the next important meeting,